Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It is post-match analysis time. Carlos Alcaraz versus Casper Ruud in the round robin match at the ATP Finals, the 2024 edition, of course. And it's due to popular demand because I asked you guys, would you prefer match preview and prediction videos to be prioritized during this tournament or post-match analysis? And you guys went for the post-match analysis. And I'm quite pleased actually, because it's quite nice to be able to dive into a match post event and be able to actually look at the insights from that rather than having to go into it beforehand. Although, of course, I do love doing both. It's tennis at the end of the day. And even though I'm not always writing my preview and prediction videos, they're always fun to do and to think about how they can play out. But in this match, it was a very, very surprising result in the end. We're going to get into the ins and outs of it. Before we do, though, remember to hit that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating and review if you're listening on a podcast platform. We appreciate each and every one of you, especially our members. You guys are legends for getting involved as always. So, who ended up getting the W? Well, it was an unlikely winner in Casper Ruud, who'd never beaten Carlos Alcaraz before this match. He ended up winning 6-1. Yes, you heard that right, 6-1. He breadsticked Alcaraz in the first set. I mean, I'm so gobsmacked even now. I can't even say Alcaraz's name right. He breadsticked Alcaraz in the first set, 6-1, and then 7-5 in the second set. So beat him in straight sets. I did say when he took the first set and we were doing the live commentary for it, Anthony was doing it, and I said, I think he needs to take it in straight sets if he wants to get the win. And I kind of feel that way against most of the really top elite players, your Djokovic's, your Sinners, your Alcaraz's. If you give them a sniff after you've managed to take the first set, if they end up taking the second set, the momentum's with them and they end up going on to win it. And that's how I tend to perceive those types of matches playing out. It depends, of course, what the matchup is. If it's Sinner Alcaraz, doesn't really matter too much. But if it's an Alcaraz versus a Ruud, and I would put Ruud in my, I would say Alcaraz is in the S category, right? The elite category. And then I'd say Ruud, given his season, is in the B category. I think you have to say. I think ordinarily he'd be in the A category if you look in the last few years, but I think he'd be the first person to say he hasn't had the best season, but he's managed to creep in to this ATP Tour Finals. And as he said after the match, he's going to take it one match at a time. He knows he's not one of the favorites, but you know what? He's just got a great win under his belt, and he's now put himself in a great position to potentially go on and play the semi-finals. And people forget that he was a finalist at the ATP Tour Finals in 2022. So he has played really well in the year-end finals, and not just in the year-end finals, but in Turin and on indoor hardcourt, which is a fantastic experience to have under your belt, and it just shows that he's able to play some of his best tennis against the best players in the world. And he's definitely not a flat track bully, as a lot of people might put to him and have done so in the past. So in terms of the match, and we'll get into that now, it was, look, I'm going to have to say, a pretty frustrating match to watch if you're an Alcaraz fan. He just wasn't able to find much rhythm, I think, is really the key to this. Now, before the match, and I have to shout out, I don't know who exactly it was in the live chat, but someone said that they thought Alcaraz looked ill in the practice. So they'd obviously watched the live stream practice on YouTube, which, by the way, I'd recommend you guys watching. Why not? I mean, I don't get anything from it, but for you guys, it's a great viewing experience where you get to watch the top players practice live for free. So go and check that out. And they said, look, he looked ill beforehand. So they gave some really good insight to that. And I thought, okay, let's see if that makes a difference. And I think it did. He didn't look 100%, it's fair to say. But in saying that, I think we have to give a lot of credit to Casper Ruud. He played extremely solid. Didn't really give Alcaraz much, especially in that first set. There wasn't really a lot. It was 1-1, and then Casper just motored through the rest of the set. And Alcaraz just wasn't good in the big points, and this is not something that you'd normally say about Alcaraz. You'd normally say the opposite. You'd normally say, look, maybe he hasn't played his best, but he's managed to pull it out when it really matters in the big moments. It wasn't the case today. He struggled big time against Ruud. And what was interesting is that actually in the first game or two, when it was 1-1, I was watching the match, and there were a couple of rallies that ended up happening, and I thought to myself, Ruud looks in trouble because Alcaraz was managing to essentially bully him from the baseline, and he was hitting the ball really cleanly, and Ruud just looked like he was struggling to keep up with Alcaraz and the pace that Alcaraz was playing at. But he acclimatized really quickly, for one, and for two, Alcaraz just started leaking errors. And I think it was a combination of the fact that Ruud upped his level and Alcaraz was just not really playing the way he should have been. The shot selection was really poor, and we'll touch upon that, especially the drop shot in a second, because we can touch upon it now. In all honesty, I mean, the drop shot was dire. It was really dire. I don't think he had much success, if any. I think it's fair to say, in this match with the drop shot. And interestingly, I think net points encapsulates obviously when you hit a drop shot when he comes to the net, and vice versa. Net points won, Alcaraz, you'd normally expect him to be around 75% plus. It was fair to say, right? I mean, he's got great hands, fantastic transition game, really big approach shots or ground strokes coming behind, serve volleys at times as well. Only won 9 out of 15 net points. So that's 60%. That's pretty low, right? For someone like Alcaraz, of someone of Alcaraz's ilk and ability at the net. Casper Ruud was 8 out of 9. It's really impressive. I mean, Casper Ruud is a very quick player across the ground. I think maybe underrated. And one of the commentators said that he wasn't the most athletic player on tour. And look, I'm not going to say he's top 3, top 5 most athletic players on tour. You wouldn't say he's the quickest. He's not up there with your Dimoners, your Alcarazes, your Sinners. Fine, okay, but he's not far off. And I think people underestimate maybe Ruud's capabilities, and maybe because he's not the tallest and doesn't have the most power, doesn't have the most athleticism, but he's got a pretty well-rounded game. And what he's able to do is play in a way that really enhances his strengths. And that's exactly what he does. He makes sure that he's serving. I mean, today I thought his serve was really good. I thought generally. I mean, he served at 68% first serves in, which is good. 68% of first serve points won and 58% behind his second serve. Now, considering if you look at Casper Ruud's second serve, Alcaraz was not doing enough with it, I think is fair to say. And that's where it was a combination of errors and also a combination of actually Ruud defending quite well in those points and making Alcaraz really work for it, I think. And he kept with Alcaraz really nicely in those rallies. I was quite impressed with his defensive work on the backhand. And look, I think it's fair to say it's not the most natural shot for him. And it's never going to be, a Zverev type backhand or a Sinner type backhand or a Djokovic type backhand. But what he's managed to do with it is find a level of confidence where he's able to hit with enough depth and spin cross court to try and nullify the opponent, at least from an attacking point of view anyway, and get to neutral quite quickly. And that's been quite impressive. I thought his depth was really good throughout the whole match, something which Alcaraz needs to look at because, he was hitting quite flat at times, which was great, which is fine. Okay, we're playing indoors. It's relatively quick, not as quick as Paris, but he wasn't hitting with enough depth at times. And I almost felt like he was caught between hitting with a lot of spin deep or hitting flat and relatively short. And it's almost like he couldn't find that in between of hitting with, maybe half as much spin, but the same amount of depth. And he just wasn't quite able to penetrate through the court as you would normally expect from him. And he was doing it at times. There was flashes of it, but it wasn't consistent. the weight, the heaviness of ball wasn't there consistently for Alcaraz today. And I'm analyzing this obviously separately to the fact that he was ill. So yes, I get he was ill. Fair enough. One thing I want to say though, and I don't know if this sounds harsh, and you guys in the comments can let me know if you think so, but at this level, surely there's something they can do to make him feel better, even if it's just for a few hours, just that he can make his way through the match. Maybe they did and it just didn't work. I don't know. Maybe it was just playing on Alcaraz's mind. He was sniffling, his nose is running. It doesn't feel great, right? He probably just feels a little bit bunged up. Like, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. It was one of those things that they tried their best, it didn't work. Maybe he's really unwell. I don't know, but yeah, it just came across as if I don't know. Maybe the team could have done a bit more, and I don't know what the circumstance is. So this is really just pure speculation. But I'm making a comparison here, and you guys are going to laugh at it. But look, obviously, I am no pro tennis player, right? So take this with a pinch of salt. When I compare myself to, one of the best players to hold a racket right now in pro tennis, but my my club level tennis, you know, level. I've had a chest infection for a few weeks, right? Been pretty ill, like really ill, and I managed to play tennis once or twice, and I managed to play through it, and I actually felt quite a bit better after. Now, obviously, he's training, right? He's practicing, so he's not super ill. He might have a cold, and I get that small margin, small percentages can make a big difference. But you'd think that he would just play through and it shouldn't have a massive effect. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, because either you play or am I just maybe being too cynical about it? But my thoughts are it shouldn't have had such an effect that it's the contributor to him losing. I think it's fair to say. Is that fair to say? I think it is. In my opinion, anyway. I don't know. Now, in terms of the rest of the match and like how it played out, so we talked about poor shot selection, leaking errors on the forehand side and backhand side. And actually, when I talked to Steve Flink at Wimbledon, one of the things I pointed out, and we had a really good conversation, was that when he played Medvedev in that semi final, one of the big things that I talked about, I mentioned to Steve, was Alcaraz is prone and can be prone to an off day on the forehand side. And when he has an off day on the forehand side, his game generally tends to dip quite dramatically in terms of his level. For Sinner, I would say his ceiling in terms of level is not as high as Alcaraz's, but his floor is definitely higher. And they did this ATP, and it's really good, the content they're doing, by the way, for the ATP Tour Finals, but they did this bit of content with Sinner and Alcaraz, and they were talking about each other and what's positive about each other's games and what they take, etc., etc. And I mean, Sinner was saying, Alcaraz is a beast. He's got this great intensity about him, and everything about that fantastic. And Alcaraz just said, you're always a 9 or a 10 out of 10. You're just super consistent. Now that's the difference. That is the contrast you get between the two players, and that's fantastic. But what it does mean with Alcaraz at the moment, anyway, and I think we have to take it with a pinch of salt, because when I say this, I'm not saying that he has massive fluctuations in level constantly. I'm just saying in comparison, because we're comparing him to the creme de la creme, right, at the top of tennis at the moment, because he's won 2 of the 4 Grand Slams. So we're going to compare him to Sinner, to Djokovic, to even Nadal beforehand, right? Those guys, we're going to compare him to them. He's already won 4 Grand Slams. So, take it as that. Don't take it as I'm saying that he is super inconsistent. I'm just saying that the way he plays, he wants to play high risk tennis at times. And if he's not maybe playing the best level of tennis, he doesn't always adjust maybe the way he should. And I could hear the commentators, especially someone like Tim Henman, and of course, is a little bit more, maybe not as adventurous a player as Alcaraz was. He was saying he needs to essentially go into lockdown mode, a bit like how Djokovic would, and just take a little bit off, try and go for bigger targets, and just don't miss. Don't maybe play with slightly less intensity and just work your way into the points and then pull the trigger in the safe moments, right? When you know, okay, you've opened up the court a lot, you don't need to go for a lot. That's not really the way Alcaraz plays. He plays with the handbrake off at all times. He doesn't really put the handbrake on. But what that meant was, because he wasn't playing particularly when the rhythm wasn't there, that he was playing drop shots at weird times and it wasn't working. The shot selection was just all over the place, in all honesty. And he struggled big time, I thought, to find a lot of rhythm. He was always kind of holding on a lot of the times as well in some of the service games, which was a pretty big red flag, I would say. He didn't manage to save a single break point. 0 out of 4 for him. 5 out of 6, by the way, break point save for Casper Ruud, which is incredibly good. I mean, that is clutch. So, I mean, look, what I will say is that Alcaraz just wasn't really at the races. And what I think is slightly alarming for me is the fact that he was actually practicing on exactly the same surface. So, from what I've read, and I could be wrong, from what I've read, he has had the exact same surface that they have at the ATP Tour Finals in Turin installed at the Juan Carlos Ferrero's academy. So, an indoor court or indoor courts, a couple of them maybe, installed at that academy for him to practice on. So, when he went out earlier in Paris, he went out pretty early. He went there to go and practice. So he's had more practice on this surface, not necessarily at the venue, but the same surface. If it's been installed, it's the same surface. I get the altitude can be different. I get that fine, but still, he's had more practice on a similar type of surface to the rest of his cohort, right? So it's a little bit alarming that someone coming into this in Casper Ruud, who by the way was 1-7, he's won one match, he's lost 7 since the US Open, right? I mean, he's lost 7 out of his last 8 matches, Casper Ruud, going into this. He was 4-0 down in the head-to-head, never beaten Alcaraz, only taken 1 set off him prior to this match. So to then come in and beat Alcaraz in straight sets, put the onus to one side, it is a little bit worrying, I think it's fair to say. And also, we clearly had, the match in Paris as well, which, again, I was a little bit alarmed by his comments about the surface and talking about how it was really fast. And, and that's actually when he was saying he was practicing. And in fact, I think during Paris or before Paris, he was practicing on that court at the Juan Carlos Ferrero Academy, which was the same as the ATP Tour Finals. And he said, these courts in Paris are much quicker. And he clearly wasn't happy about it. He lost to Ugo Humbert in a very close match, could have won it, 7-5 in the third set. And that was a little bit worrying for me because courts should be different speeds. So there shouldn't really be an expectation for an indoor hard court to be slower than, or just not fast, I think. I don't understand why it needs to be medium or medium slow or even medium fast. Why can't it be a fast hard court? We've got loads of slow hard courts, in Wells and Miami and wherever else. They're all pretty slow. So I don't see an issue, especially indoors, right, with it being quicker. And it just means that players have to adapt to it. I have no issue with it. The ball situation is a separate topic, but court-wise, no issues. I think the final thing to talk about really is the second set. So obviously Alcaraz was 5-2 up. If you didn't watch it, spoiler alert, I guess. He was 5-2 up in the second set. So he started to find some good level, I would say, like some sort of good level anyway. And Casper Ruud, as I said, he's not in the same tier as Alcaraz. When Alcaraz starts going through the gears, it's very difficult for someone like Casper Ruud to stay with him. When Alcaraz started coming to the net more, volleying well, just finding good angles, better depth, just hitting cleaner balls, less errors, and was holding serve easier in that second set generally. So he went 5-2 up. He's returning better as well. Casper Ruud's maybe not making as many first serves in that second set for a period, and he's not able to find those aces. He sealed the deal, for example, in that second set at the end with an ace to seal the match. But it just wasn't quite clicking for Casper at the start of the second set, and Alcaraz managed to capitalize, which is exactly what he needed to do. And you're thinking, okay, and in my mind, I'm thinking 5-2 up. I mean, yes, it's on Casper Ruud's serve, but he's still 5-2 up Alcaraz. Surely he's going to take this set and take us into a decider, and then you probably say, okay, he's the favorite, right? Now, Alcaraz then goes on to lose the next 5 games. And that to me was very, very disappointing. And I think if you're an Alcaraz fan, you're probably looking at that thinking, what has just happened? Because that to me was mind boggling, if I'm being completely honest. No set points, serving for it at 5-4 up, 5-3 up, sorry, even. And, you're just thinking to yourself, like, Carlos, what's happened here? What's happened here? And he saved match points at 6-5, and you're thinking, okay, en route serve, 6-5 down, it gets to juice, save some match points. You're thinking he's going to break back here, we're going to go to a tiebreaker, he's going to pull it off, he's going to pull off a great escape, take us to a third set. But no, Ruud just stood firm. I was really impressed with Ruud's mental fortitude in this match. I have to say, really, really impressed. I just didn't really expect him to have this sort of level, considering the form that he's coming into this tournament with. Not just recently, but this whole year, it's just not been. It's not been great. I mean, like, we have to be honest. He made 2 Grand Slam finals in 2022. He made 1 Grand Slam final last year in 2023, and then he's made none this year, and he's not really gone deep at any slam, and it's not been a great year for him, I think it's fair to say. So, for him to then come into this match and play the way he did, I think is a real testament, I think, to his character. I was very, very impressed. Kudos to him. I think for Carlos, though, he's going to have to brush himself off, dust himself down, and he's going to have to, one, get lots of sleep, recharge, recover. I mean, he's got to do something. I mean, if the illness is really that much of an issue, they need to sort it because, hopefully it's nothing too serious. But if he's practicing and he's playing, then I'm hoping it's not super serious. But they need to get that in check ASAP. And then he's got 2 really difficult matches. And now Andrei Rublev, I think, is quite winnable. As I would have thought, to be fair, Casper Ruud would have been as well. No offense to both players, but just form-wise and level-wise in comparison to Alcaraz. And then he's got Alexander Zverev, who I actually picked before the tournament to beat him. And I think it's looking even more likely now. He just beat Rublev 6-4, 6-4. And I think on these indoor hard courts with his serve, which he no longer has those jitters anymore, and with him playing confidently after just winning Paris, I mean, it's going to be difficult for Carlos. It's going to be really difficult. So he's going to have to pull something pretty magical out of the bag, which we know he's capable of against both Rublev and then also Zverev as well, to have a chance of qualifying, right? That's really how it is. I don't think he's going to qualify with 1 win. I could be wrong, but it's going to be very, very difficult. So let's see what happens. But everyone was talking about an Alcaraz in a semi or final, but he might not even make it out of the group, which would be a massive shame, I think, if you're just a general neutral tennis fan. But it would look. I mean, it could be nice to see others. I just think the level that's the potential level that we could see from an Alcaraz Sinner match exceeds any other matchup from this ATP Tour Finals. That's potential level. If we were to see Alcaraz, Zverev, Sinner, Zverev, Medvedev, Alcaraz, whatever combination you put in front of me, if you were to say to me, Faizan, look, do you think this match could have a higher potential level of play than Sinner Alcaraz? I would say no. Because the only other player I think that could bring that, of course, is Djokovic. He's not here. He's not playing. He's injured. Ongoing injury, of course, which is a shame, but it is what it is. So, yeah, I mean, look, if we want to see the best tennis, we want to see the best chance of seeing the best tennis on display, then those two need to get through. But either way, I'm really impressed with Ruud. I'm also been quite impressed with the level of some of the players so far. Taylor Fritz taking out Medvedev. Medvedev had the breakdown. We could do a whole video on that, to be honest. And I think I'll do a video on Medvedev and what he needs to do in the 2025 season, or what he needs to do in his preseason anyway, in preparation for the 2025 season, because this year I think has been quite a brutal season for him. It's been a season where he hasn't really got the results he's wanted. He hasn't won a tournament since Rome last year, and he's had some heartbreaking losses in finals, and it's probably shown him that now Sinner and Alcaraz have not maybe figured him out, but they are quite clear favourites against him now in in matches, and that's not ideal because it wasn't necessarily the case before this year. So he's now in an interesting inflection point in his career, and he's going to have to think about where he goes next from here. But look, he's still in the tournament. He's only lost one match, so maybe he picks it up in terms of level and comes through. Who knows? Guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. I know that I've talked for quite a bit, but there's a lot to get stuck into. And I think in terms of, post-match analysis, normally what I tend to do is get really into the nitty-gritty of some of the crucial points and some of the really crucial elements of kind of tactically how it played out. But in this matchup, there just wasn't a whole lot to talk about in terms of, forehand to forehand and tactically what played out, because it was more a case of Alcaraz playing a really low level of tennis compared to what we expect. And, Ruud just playing extremely solid, which, I mentioned a few things, obviously, with the backhand cross. So I was impressed with that. We know his forehand is impressive through the court. He can open up angles with high topspin on that side. And I thought he served really solid today as well. And returning-wise, he's never been, in my opinion, the best. But we saw some great returns from him today, especially on the forehand side as well, running around that backhand. There's a great winner he hit as well, in to win, which, is definitely going to be on tennis TV, as I'd say. So fantastic win. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember to that like button. Do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. We will see you tomorrow for some live commentary, hopefully, and also some more post-match analysis. And we've got some really interesting videos in the works. So make sure you click that notification bell so you get alerted to all the new content that's coming out. We're going to have some really cool bits of content coming out in the off season. So make sure you do have that notification bell clicked, and also your notifications on YouTube so you get alerted and you don't miss out on any content that may be of interest. Thank you guys. See you soon.